Captain Thane Lark, a man whose reputation was about as reputable as a politician's promise, strolled into the bridge of his ship, the Rusty Cutlass. It was a name that promised adventure, danger, and occasional tetanus. The crew was already buzzing like a particularly dysfunctional hive, and the familiar sound of beep-boop-bzzzt filled the air. "Yo, Cap," called out Jenna, the ship's mechanic who was more comfortable with wrenches than with people. "Got something on the long-range scanner. Looks like trouble." Thane rubbed his chin, which was perpetually covered in a stubble that defied both razors and common decency. "Trouble. That's my middle name, though the birth certificate says Arthur. What is it this time?" "Another bounty on my head or another station we've been banned from," Jenna snorted. "Neither, but just as fun. It's a rebellion. Galactic archives burning. Seems like someone's throwing a tantrum and forgot the fire extinguishers." Thane leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Rebellion, huh? Nothing like a good all-uprising to get the blood pumping. What's the beef? Tax hikes? Political oppression?" "Another one of those we hate Mondays movements." Jenna tapped a few buttons, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing a dozen alien species, each uglier than the last, shouting in unison. "Seems they're burning anything related to Earth's music." "Earth's music?" Thane's eyebrows shot up, threatening to ditch his face out of sheer disbelief. "What Beethoven do this time? Compose something in 5/4 time that made them all dizzy." "Honestly, wouldn't put it past him," Jenna quipped. "But no, apparently the whole galaxy's terrified of it. They think Earth's music has some kind of power, like it can incite revolutions or, God forbid, creativity." "Creativity, the ultimate weapon," Thane sighed. "Why create when you can destroy, right?" He shook his head, his cynicism veiling a spark of intrigue. "So, this rebellion, they're torching archives to keep Earth's symphonies from turning their brains to mush." "Exactly," Jenna replied, leaning back in her chair with the grace of someone who hadn't slept in days and didn't particularly care. "And here I thought the galaxy couldn't get any dumber." Thane chuckled, a sound reminiscent of a rusty engine finally kicking into gear. "Well, I suppose it's our civic duty to involve ourselves, make sure the music police don't confiscate our mixtapes." He turned to the rest of his crew, all of whom were pretending to be busier than they were. "All right, folks, strap in. We're going into the heart of cultural censorship. Try not to get us all killed, all right?" "You got it, boss," replied Gregor, the navigator, who was as trustworthy as a snake in a mongoose convention. "I'll chart a course for the rebellion. Try not to crash into anything expensive." "Much appreciated," Thane said, sarcasm layering his words like cheap paint on a rusty hull. "Jenna, make sure the engines don't fall off halfway there." "I'll tighten them up with duct tape and a prayer," she responded, raising a wrench as if it were Excalibur. The Rusty Cutlass jumped into hyperspace, the stars stretching like cosmic taffy as they hurtled towards what was sure to be another regrettable adventure. As the ship sped through the void, Thane couldn't help but ponder the absurdity of it all. The galaxy feared Earth's music, yet humanity had survived centuries of it with only the occasional bout of disco fever. "Hey, Cap," Jenna called out, dragging him back from his musings. "You ever think about why Earth's music freaks him out so much?" Thane shrugged, a gesture of universal ignorance. "Maybe it's too emotional for them. You know how aliens can be, show them a chord progression and they think you're plotting a coup. Or maybe they're just jealous," Jenna suggested. "After all, not everyone can belt out Bohemian Rhapsody and mean it." "Yeah," Thane agreed. "There's a certain power in music, something primal. It's like a universal language, but one that can actually start wars instead of just misunderstandings." The ship jostled, a reminder that the Rusty Cutlass was held together more by goodwill than engineering. "We're coming up on the archive," Gregor announced, his eyes glued to the controls. "Looks like a real mess down there." Thane glanced at the view screen, taking in the sight of a space station engulfed in a chaotic dance of flames and debris. "Well, isn't that just a lovely bonfire?" he remarked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's see if we can find someone who's not busy setting fire to things and get some answers. As the rusty cutlass docked, Thane and Jenna prepared to disembark. "Remember," Thane said, "we're just here to gather information, not join the revolution. Unless, of course, there's a catchy anthem involved." "Got it," Jenna replied, rolling her eyes. "Don't worry, boss, I'll try not to start a riot." They stepped onto the station, where the air was thick with smoke and tension. Various aliens rushed past, some carrying books and data pads, others carrying torches. Thane approached a group of panicked archivists, hoping to glean some insight. "Hey there," he called out, flashing a smile that could melt a neutron star. "Mind telling me why everyone's playing with matches?" An archivist, a wiry creature with too many eyes and not enough limbs, turned to him. "It's the music," it squeaked, its voice a high-pitched whine. "We can't let it spread, it corrupts. It inspires." "God forbid anyone gets inspired," Jenna muttered under her breath. "Why's it such a big deal?" Thane pressed, his curiosity piqued. "What harm can a little rhythm and melody do?" "You don't understand," the archivist replied, wringing its hands in anxiety. "Earth's music has caused revolutions across the galaxy. It's too powerful, too unpredictable." "Sounds like they need to lighten up," Thane said, shrugging. "But hey, that's just me." He turned to Jenna, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking about snagging a few samples for ourselves, then yeah," she replied, her eyes glinting with excitement. "Let's grab some tunes and get out here before the whole place goes up in smoke." Thane nodded, the thrill of the heist buzzing in his veins. Together, they navigated the chaos, grabbing what they could from the ruined archives. As they made their way back to the rusty cutlass, Thane couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. "You know," he said, "there's something poetic about saving music from the flames." "Yeah," Jenna agreed, hefting a data pad filled with Earth's greatest hits. "Guess we're not such terrible people after all." "Don't let it go to your head," Thane warned, chuckling. "We still have a perfectly terrible reputation to uphold." They boarded the ship, the stolen music safely in tow. As they prepared to leave, Thane turned to his crew, his voice filled with mock gravity. "All right, folks, let's make like a tree and get the hell out of here. Next stop, anywhere but here." The rusty cutlass launched back into the void, leaving the burning station behind. As they sped away, Thane couldn't shake the feeling that they were in for something big, something that would shake the galaxy to its core. And all because of a few notes and a catchy beat. "Cap," Jenna called out, interrupting his thoughts once more. "What's the plan now?" "Plan," Thane replied, leaning back in his chair with a grin. "We improvise as usual, but first let's see what all the fuss is about. Cue up some of that forbidden music, will you?" Jenna nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Sure thing, boss. Let's see if this stuff really is as dangerous as they say." As the first notes filled the air, a strange, palpable energy settled over the crew. It was as if the music reached into their very souls, igniting a fire they hadn't known was there. "Wow," Thane muttered, awestruck. "I think I get it now, this music. It's alive." "Yeah," Jenna agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like nothing I've ever heard before." The crew sat in silence, listening to the forbidden melodies that sparked fear across the galaxy. For the first time in a long time, Thane felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder of the power of humanity's creativity. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "maybe this whole thing isn't just about the music. Maybe it's about something bigger." "You think?" Jenna asked, her eyes fixed on the stars. "Yeah," Thane replied. "Maybe it's about change, about challenging the status quo, and hell, if music's the way to do it, then I'm all in." As the ship sailed through the endless expanse, leaving the chaos of the station behind, Thane couldn't help but smile. Because in a galaxy that feared Earth's music, he finally understood its true power, and he was ready to use it to his advantage. As the rusty cutlass sailed through the void like a drunk trying to find his way back home, the crew settled into their usual roles of organized chaos. Thane Lark, Captain Extraordinaire, or at least extraordinary at finding trouble, leaned against the command console, idly fiddling with a half-smoked cigar that had seen better days. The thrill of recent escapades clung to him like the smell of burnt circuitry. "All right, crew," Thane began, his voice carrying just the right mix of authority and mischief. "We've grabbed ourselves some of the galaxy's most wanted tunes. Now let's see if we can turn this racket into a payday before someone decides to turn us into space debris." Jenna, the ship's mechanic and resident miracle worker with a wrench, looked up from a heap of tangled wires. "And how exactly do you plan on cashing in on something everyone's busy burning?" Thane flashed a grin that could only be described as reckless optimism. "Oh, you know the usual. We find someone with more money than sense and less taste than either." Gregor, their navigator with the morals of a used starship salesman, chimed in from his corner, where he was busy pretending to do anything but plot his next betrayal. "Speaking of taste, Cap, where are we headed next? Or are we just cruising until we run out of fuel and oxygen?" "First one's free," Thane replied. "Next one costs you. We're heading to Thalax Prime. There's bound to be someone there with a penchant for Earth's forbidden noise." Jenna snorted, shaking her head. "Great! Another hive of scum and villainy. Just what we need." As they approached Thalax Prime, the ship's long-range scanner buzzed to life, picking up the usual cocktail of signals: distress calls, automated advertisements, and the occasional pirate transmission promising untold riches for a small read. Massive investment. "Looks like a party down there," Gregor noted, his tone as dry as a Martian dust storm. "Parties are just riots with better music," Jenna quipped, reassembling some bit of machinery Thane was sure had never worked properly to begin with. Docking at the station, they were greeted by the usual mix of aliens and hustlers, each more interested in their own agendas than anyone else's well-being. The air smelled of desperation and reheated protein paste, a real olfactory delight. They hadn't gone 10 steps before they were intercepted by a creature that resembled a lizard that had taken a bath in fluorescent paint and lost a battle with a high-voltage cable. It introduced itself as Xylith, a renegade scholar with an enthusiasm for Earth's music that bordered on concerning. "You are the humans with the music, yes?" Xylith asked, its eyes darting nervously like it expected a hitman to materialize from the shadows at any moment. Thane eyed the creature cautiously. "Depends who's asking and what they're offering." Xylith leaned in conspiratorially. "You don't understand. The music you're carrying, it attracts them. The pale ones." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Great, more cosmic horror stories. Just what we need." "No, no," Xylith insisted, voice rising in pitch. "The pale ones are real. They are an ancient force hunting down anyone who tries to harness the power of Earth's music." Thane rubbed his temples. "Fantastic. All we wanted was to make a quick credit, and now we've got spectral music critics after us. What's next? Angry space librarians." Xylith's expression turned grave. "The pale ones are relentless. They fear the music because it inspires change, and they fear change more than anything." "Figures," Jenna muttered. "Can't have the galaxy getting any bright ideas." Thane studied Xylith, weighing the truth of its words against the possibility of it being just another crazy tale spun by those who liked their reality shaken, not stirred. "So, what's in it for you, then?" "Why warn us?" Xylith fidgeted, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "I study the music. I want to see how it affects sentient beings like you. I believe it holds the key to something much larger." "Enlightenment?" Thane asked, a sardonic twist to his lips. "Survival," Xylith corrected. "The way things are, the galaxy is stagnating. We need that spark." Jenna crossed her arms, skepticism practically radiating off her. "And you expect us to be this spark?" "Not you," Xylith clarified. "The music, but you can carry it, spread it." Thane sighed, a slow exhalation of resignation and reluctant intrigue. "All right, suppose we believe you. What's next?" "We can't exactly go around announcing we've got a jukebox of galactic doom." "Lay low," Xylith advised. "The pale ones are already aware of your acquisition. They'll come for you sooner or later." "Never a dull moment," Gregor muttered, glancing at the exits like they might offer a quicker path to retirement. Back on the Rusty Cutlass, Thane gathered his crew to plot their next move. The ship hummed around them, a familiar symphony of creaks and groans that had become comforting over their adventures. "All right, folks," Thane said, addressing his ragtag band of misfits. "We've got ourselves a new problem. Seems the galaxy's decided Earth's music is the ultimate form of rebellion, and now we've got some ethereal bogeymen called the Pale Ones after us." "Nice," Jenna said dryly. "And here I was hoping for a quiet life of fixing broken pipes and avoiding explosive decompression." Gregor leaned back, arms crossed. "So, what's the plan? Besides the usual run and hope they get bored, we head to the Outer Rim, keep a low profile," Thane proposed. "Maybe see if we can find someone who knows more about these Pale Ones. Last thing we need is getting caught with our tails between our legs." "And if we run into them?" Jenna asked, eyebrows raised. Thane grinned, a devil-may-care expression that had gotten them through more scraps than he cared to count. "Then we show them what humans are made of, and remind them that when you mess with the music, you get the band." The crew chuckled, a rare moment of levity in the face of impending doom. As the ship drifted away from the station, Thane couldn't help but feel a strange sense of purpose. He'd never been one for causes, but if Earth's music could shake the galaxy's foundations, maybe there was something worth fighting for after all. The journey to the Outer Rim was fraught with the usual hazards: asteroid fields, malfunctioning equipment, and the occasional attempt by Gregor to sell them all out for a quick profit. But they managed to avoid the worst of it, driven by a mix of stubborn grit and sheer dumb luck. During the long hours of travel, Thane found himself listening to the forbidden music they'd salvaged, and he began to understand the fear it inspired. There was something raw and powerful about it, something that resonated with the deepest parts of himself he'd long since buried. It was during one of these introspective sessions, as the notes of an old blues tune echoed through the ship, that Thane had an idea. "Jenna, get in here," he called out, breaking the serene spell. She appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from her hands. "What's up, Cap? Need me to fix something that's not broken again?" "Nah, this time I need you to break something that's working a little too well. The long-range scanner. We need to go dark for a while." Jenna's expression turned serious, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You think they're tracking us? Call it a hunch," Thane replied. "I'd rather not find out the hard way. Let's keep them guessing." Jenna nodded, heading off to work her mechanical magic. Thane watched her go, a weight settling in his gut. He knew they were playing with fire, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were doing it for the right reasons. Or at least not the wrong ones. As they approached the Outer Rim, the stars seemed to thin, leaving a vast, empty expanse that mirrored the uncertainty ahead. Thane couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental, something that went beyond mere survival. "Cap," Jenna's voice crackled over the intercom. "Scanners down. We're officially flying blind." Thane smiled wryly, leaning back in his chair. "Good. Let's see if we can stay lost long enough to make a difference." As the Rusty Cutlass drifted through the void, its crew bound together by fate and folly, Thane felt a strange sense of peace. Perhaps Earth's music had more to offer than chaos and rebellion. Perhaps somewhere in those forbidden melodies, they'd find the answers they were looking for. Or maybe they'd just end up as another regrettable footnote in the annals of space history. Either way, it promised to be one hell of a ride. And for Captain Thane Lark, that was more than enough. The Rusty Cutlass cruised through the vast, indifferent void of space like a drunk at last call, unsteady but determined to make it somewhere. Thane stood at the command console, staring into the abyss, which was staring back with all the warmth of a taxman. Jenna was busy in the engine room, maintaining the organized chaos that kept them from becoming a permanent fixture in space debris. "So, we're just going to drift into the Outer Rim and hope for the best?" Gregor asked, though the hope in his voice was about as substantial as a hologram. "Pretty much," Thane replied, rubbing his stubbly chin. Unless you've got a better idea that doesn't involve selling us out to the highest bidder. Gregor smirked, a gesture that was both genuine and a little too practiced. Just checking you hadn't gone soft. Though I suppose if you had, we'd all be smelling daisies by now. Funny thing about daisies, Thane said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. They have a real knack for growing in places they're not wanted. Kind of like us. The long-range scanner was blessedly silent, reduced to a glorified paperweight at Jenna's skilled hands. Which was just as well. Thane had a feeling that the universe wasn't exactly sending them love letters. "We've got a problem," Jenna announced over the intercom, her tone carrying the same warmth one might reserve for a malfunction alert. "And by problem, I mean someone on this ship owes me a new set of thermal couplings." Thane sighed. "I thought you said they were good for another 1,000 light years." "They were," Jenna replied, the clanking of tools punctuating her words, until Gregor decided to test their elasticity by overloading the system to charge his personal holo set. "Hey," Gregor protested, sounding as innocent as a used hyperdrive salesman. "I was just trying to get better reception." "You ever tried watching three-dimensional netball with a static clip? It's a travesty." "Right," Thane said, weariness seeping into his voice. "Because staying entertained while we're on the run from cosmic music critics is priority number one." A sudden jolt rocked the ship, sending Thane sprawling against the console. Alarms blared, adding an unwelcome soundtrack to their already complicated lives. "What the hell was that?" Thane barked, pulling himself upright. "Proximity alert," Jenna's voice crackled in. "We've got company, and not the kind that brings a bottle." Through the viewport, a rebellious blockade appeared, their vessels arranged like a haphazard game of dominoes waiting for the first push. The blockade's ships were a mismatched collection of metal, a reflection of their owners, scrappy, desperate, and entirely too interested in the rusty cutlass. "Rebels," Gregor muttered, his voice carrying the kind of respect one might show to a particularly virulent strain of the flu. "They think we're allies because of the music." Thane snorted. "Because we have a record collection, we're suddenly revolutionaries." "I'd have thought overthrowing the galaxy required more than a good playlist." The blockade's lead ship hailed them, and Jenna patched it through to the main console. An image flickered into life, displaying a grizzled alien whose face looked like it had been used to test meteorite impacts. "You are allies of the noise," the alien demanded, his voice deep and resonant, like a bass guitar trying to start a conversation. Thane played it cool, the way one might when accidentally walking into a bar brawl. "Allies? That's a strong word. Let's just say we appreciate good tunes." Gregor snickered behind him. "And the occasional riot." The alien's eyes narrowed, suspicion lurking in their depths. "The pale ones will come for you, for us all. We must unite against them." Thane nodded, adopting an expression of solemn understanding that he'd practiced in every mirror he'd ever passed. "Unite, right, sounds like a real party, but we're kind of in the middle of something. You know, running for our lives and all that." The alien hesitated, caught between distrust and a desperate need for allies. "We can offer protection." "Supplies." Thane considered this, weighing survival against the likely prospect of getting caught in a crossfire of cosmic proportions. "Tempting, but we prefer to keep our heads down. You know, low profile." "Then you are cowards." "Realists," Thane corrected, his grin as sharp as a shard of broken glass. "We're realists who appreciate the finer points of not being dead." The transmission cut abruptly, the blockade ships maneuvering into positions that suggested they weren't buying what Thane was selling, which was more than he could say for Gregor. "Looks like they're not taking no for an answer," Jenna said, her voice betraying as much excitement as if she'd just been told her tax refund was delayed. Thane glanced around at his crew, a ragtag band of misfits who somehow managed to function as a unit. "All right, folks, time to earn our keep. Suggestions?" "We could always blast some of the music," Gregor offered, a mischievous glint in his eye. "See how they like it." Thane chuckled, the kind of laugh that belonged to a man with little to lose. "I like it." Irritating them into submission sounds right up our alley. Jenna rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. And if that doesn't work, then we run like hell, Thane replied, hitting the controls to blast out the first tune in their collection, a catchy number from Earth's punk era, all discordant chords and raw energy. The reaction was immediate. The blockade ships faltered, their pilots clearly unprepared for the auditory assault. Thane seized the opportunity, swinging the rusty cutlass around and gunning the engines like a bat out of hell's worst neighborhood. Who knew rebellion could have such a beat? Jenna quipped, holding on as the ship veered through the blockade. Thane focused on the task at hand, weaving through the chaos with a steady hand and an unsteady heart. Thank the Pale Ones for small favors, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Gregor laughed, a sound that held no mirth but plenty of irony. Or maybe we just turned them into fans. The rusty cutlass broke free of the blockade, leaving the rebel ship scrambling to recover. Thane took a moment to breathe, the adrenaline fading to leave behind the familiar fatigue of survival. Nice work, everyone, Thane said, the words carrying the weight of genuine gratitude. Remind me to never doubt the power of good old-fashioned punk rock. Jenna leaned against the console, her expression bemused. Let's just hope the Pale Ones aren't as into music as those guys were. Thane nodded, though in his heart he knew that was a hope as fragile as the tenuous piece they'd just left behind. Let's keep moving. Next round's on me if we make it out of this mess in one piece. The crew settled back into their routines, the tension gradually easing but never fully disappearing. In the quiet moments, Thane reflected on the strange path they'd chosen. They were fugitives, sure, but somehow they'd become more than that. Maybe Xylith was right. Maybe Earth's music really was the spark needed to light a fire under the galaxy's collective backside. Cap, Jenna's voice broke into his thoughts. I've managed to jury-rig the thermal couplings for now, but we're gonna need replacements soon. And I don't mean the kind you find in a back alley. Noted, Thane replied, his mind already spinning with plans that likely involved bending the truth and outright lying. Add it to the shopping list for when we hit the next safe haven. If we find one, Gregor added, ever the pessimist. When, Thane corrected, with a bravado he didn't quite feel. Because if there's one thing we're good at, it's surviving against impossible odds. As they continued their journey into the unknown, Thane couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The Pale Ones, the rebels, the music, it was all bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. But for now, they had a ship, a plan, and an unlikely weapon in their arsenal, and that would have to be enough. The stars stretched out before them, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the tiny role they played in it. But even a small stone could create ripples, and the rusty cutlass carried with it a melody that might yet change the course of history. Or, at the very least, provide the soundtrack for their next reckless escape. Either way, Thane thought, it promised to be one hell of a performance. The rusty cutlass hurtled through space, the stars outside a blur of light, much like Thane Lark's thoughts. He stood at the command console, scratching at the stubble that seemed to permanently reside on his chin, the way rats might on a sinking ship. Thane was considering the rather unpleasant news that Earth's music, his current cargo and meal ticket, might just be the universe's latest weapon of mass destruction. For a box of dusty old records, they're causing quite the ruckus, he muttered, shaking his head. Jenna, busy in the engine room and quite possibly the only reason the ship hadn't exploded yet, crackled over the intercom. Ruckus. Try intergalactic incident. I just got a ping from some radio head named Vix. Says they are an alien defector with a proposition. Another one, Gregor snorted, lounging in a seat with the type of relaxed posture usually reserved for the clinically comatose. We should start charging for audience time slots. What's the play, Cap? Jenna asked. Are we going to listen to this one sob story too? Thane sighed, feeling like a minor deity responsible for a particularly unruly pantheon. Patch them through. Let's see what kind of madness we're dealing with this time. A holographic display sputtered to life, revealing Vix. Their appearance was typical for a species that seemed to enjoy testing cosmetics of the universe's ugliest planets. Skin like a reptilian kaleidoscope, eyes that blinked sideways, and a grin that could frighten a predator away. "Greetings, Captain Lark," Vix began, their voice the auditory equivalent of sandpaper. "Vix, is it?" Thane said, adopting a tone he'd learned from speaking to angry creditors. "What can I do for someone who looks like a tie-dye accident in a lizard factory?" "I have information which may interest you," Vix said, unfazed by the jab. "The Pale Ones are not the only threat. Earth's music has become a point of interest for many factions. It can be weaponized." "Weaponized?" Gregor perked up, his interest piqued like a gambler spotting a loose slot machine. "You mean more than just deafening a room with disco?" "Indeed," Vix confirmed, nodding with the solemnity of a funeral procession. "The right frequencies can disrupt technology, control minds, incite rebellion. Sounds like the usual Saturday night," Jenna quipped, her voice dripping sarcasm over the intercom. Thane leaned back, crossing his arms. "And let me guess you're here to offer us the secret to this symphonic warfare in exchange for—" "What exactly?" Vix's grin widened, revealing teeth like shards of glass. "A partnership. I can help you control this power. In return, I require passage to Thalax Prime, where I have scores to settle." "Scores, huh?" Thane mused. "Hopefully not musical ones." Gregor chuckled, though there was no mirth in it. "So, the lizard wants a ride. How do we know you won't turn us over to the highest bidder the moment we hit port?" "I have no love for the factions," Vix replied, the bitterness in their voice as palpable as the rust in the air, "the kind that never leaves you, no matter how much you scrub. The Pale Ones, the rebels, they are all the same. Power-hungry and deaf to reason." Thane glanced at Gregor, whose face wore the skepticism of a man who's been offered a free meal at a cannibal's banquet. "What do you think, Greg?" "I think," Gregor said slowly, "that our options are as limited as a one-armed bandit's reach." Thane considered this. Despite the universe's best attempts at ending their little escapade, they were still here, still kicking, still scheming like the scoundrels they were. "All right, Vix, you've got a deal. But if you so much as hum the wrong tune, we'll jettison you faster than a bad demo tape." "Understood, Captain," Vix replied, bowing their head slightly, respect mingling with relief. "Jenna, prep the spare cabin," Thane ordered. "And make sure our new friend here isn't smuggling a small army up their sleeves." "Will do," Jenna replied. "Though it's their sleeves I'm worried about." Vix's integration into the crew was about as smooth as expected, meaning it involved an interrogation, a mildly awkward welcome, and the crew collectively deciding to not ask too many questions. After all, in space, you had to take your friends where you found them, even if they were liable to eat flies on occasion. "So, how exactly do we use these frequencies?" Thane asked, leaning against the console once more. "I'm assuming it involves more than just a good sound system." Vix nodded, standing awkwardly in the cramped control room, their tail flicking with nervous energy. "It involves precise modulation, technology that can amplify and broadcast the music across vast distances. And you can help us build this tech?" Gregor asked, his skepticism still hanging around like a bad smell. "Yes," Vix said simply. "But we will need resources, components, things that are not easy to acquire." "Great," Thane said, a dry laugh escaping him. "So we're back to the shopping list from hell." "Looks like it," Jenna chimed in over the intercom. "I hope you weren't planning on using that credit line anytime soon." "We've got some contacts on Thalax Prime," Thane replied, his mind already spinning with possibilities. "Shady as a solar eclipse and twice as expensive, but they might have what we need. If not," Gregor added, ever the optimist, "we can always sell tickets to Vix's karaoke night." "Charming," Vix said, their tone flatter than a squashed pancake. "But failure is not an option if you wish to remain breathing." "Understood," Thane said, though the seriousness of the situation was not lost on him. Each step they took seemed to plunge them deeper into a web of intrigue, espionage, and the kind of danger that made sane men take up gardening instead. but sanity had never been their strong suit. "All right," Thane addressed the crew, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Let's get moving. Next stop, Thalax Prime. And remember, folks, if anyone asks, we're just a traveling band of music enthusiasts. With a penchant for mayhem," Jenna added. "Naturally," Thane agreed, grinning as he settled into his chair. "Let's give him one hell of a show." The rusty cutlass navigated through the void, leaving behind the chaos they'd stirred and heading straight for the eye of the storm. With each passing moment, Thane could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like an ill-fitting cloak. But beneath the cynicism, beneath the snark, there was a glimmer of hope, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could pull this off. "Cap," Jenna's voice interrupted his thoughts once more. "I'm picking up a signal. It's weak, but it's there. Could be a trap." "Seems like everything is these days," Thane replied. "Patch it through." The signal wavered for a moment, then resolved into a voice cool and detached. "Captain Lark, I've heard tales of your exploits. You're becoming a popular topic among some rather unsavory crowds." Thane felt a flicker of recognition. "Do I know you?" A mutual acquaintance suggested we have a chat. "I'm called Marwick and I have a proposition." "Another one?" Gregor whispered, shaking his head. "Is there a galactic memo we missed?" "Listening," Thane said, his interest piqued against his better judgment. Marwick continued, "You're in possession of something powerful, Captain. And power, as I'm sure you know, is a dangerous thing, but it can also be profitable." "Your point?" Thane asked, his patience wearing thin. He wasn't in the mood for cloak and dagger nonsense when they were already juggling enough explosive variables. "My organization could help you control this power," Marwick said, the offer wrapped in a velvet glove of menace. "For a share, of course. A large share." "Generous," Thane said, his voice dripping with irony. "But we're managing just fine on our own." "Are you?" Marwick's tone shifted, a hint of challenge in the question. "The Pale Ones are relentless, Captain. They will not stop until they have what you possess." "I appreciate the concern," Thane replied, "but we're quite adept at avoiding trouble." "Until it finds you," Marwick countered smoothly. "Think it over, Captain. My offer stands, but the window for acceptance is closing." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving behind a silence charged with the promise of future entanglements. "Charming fellow," Jenna commented dryly. "Another friend for the Christmas card list. We're collecting quite the set," Gregor added, scratching his head. "What's next, a space vampire?" "Let's hope not," Thane said, though the idea wasn't entirely outside the realm of possibility these days. "For now, we stick to the plan. Thalax Prime, supplies, and figuring out how to turn music into the universe's worst headache." The crew nodded, returning to their duties with a mix of determination and fatalism that had served them well thus far. Thane watched them work, feeling a strange mix of pride and trepidation. "We'll pull through," Jenna said, as if reading his mind. "We always do." "Yeah," Thane agreed, though he knew better than to voice the doubts that lingered like shadows at the edges of his thoughts. "Let's make sure we do." As the rusty cutlass continued its journey, its crew bound together by ties stronger than mere circumstance, Thane couldn't help but wonder how long their luck would hold. But then, luck was just one more thing they were used to bending to their will. And with Earth's music in their hands, they might just have the ultimate wild card. The stars stretched out before them, a tapestry of infinite possibilities and untold dangers. But for now, they had a destination, a plan, and a chance to turn the tables on the universe's latest threats. And that was as good a starting point as any. The rusty cutlass hurtled through the void, its hull groaning like an old man getting out of bed. Thane Lark stood at the command console, arms crossed, brow furrowed, trying to maintain an air of authority while his guts twisted into a sailor's knot. Usually that meant he was onto something good or severely constipated. Given their current predicament, he couldn't afford the latter. "Captain," Jenna's voice crackled through the intercom, "we've got company. And by company, I mean the kind that doesn't bring you wine or good news." "What kind of company are we talking?" Thane asked, already dreading the answer. "Looks like a coalition fleet," Jenna replied, her tone as dry as a desert martini. Multiple ships, big ones. Think of every bad date you've ever had, then multiply. Fantastic, Thane muttered, rubbing his temples. What do they want? An autograph, more like a surrender, Gregor chimed in from his station, flipping through data screens with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own obituaries. Guess they heard we're sitting on Earth's greatest hits. Vix, lounging nearby with all the grace of a lizard sunning itself, chimed in. These leaders will not negotiate. They consider Earth's music a threat. They'll stop at nothing to secure it. Thane snorted, a mirthless chuckle escaping his lips. So they want our mixtape and they're not taking no for an answer, pretty much, Jenna confirmed, the sound of her tapping on keyboards filling the cabin. Our options are looking thinner than a politician's promise. All right, let's hear it, Thane said, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down heavier than ever. What's the plan? There's always the old standby, Gregor suggested, cracking his knuckles. We could run. Thane echoed, eyebrows raised. From a coalition fleet. We'd be lucky to outrun a space slug at this point, then we fight. Vix's question was more of a statement, their eyes glinting with a fierce, cold light. Fight. Jenna laughed, the sound brittle as shattered glass. With what? Harsh language and wishful thinking. Okay, Thane interjected, holding up a hand. Let's not lose our heads yet. We've got Earth's music. Let's see if we can't use it to our advantage, like serenading them into submission. Gregor quipped. Or driving them mad, Thane countered, a kernel of an idea forming amidst the chaos. Vix, you said these frequencies can disrupt tech, right? Vix nodded. With the right equipment, yes. We don't have the right equipment, Jenna reminded, ever the realist. Our long-range scanner is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Then we improvise, Thane said, determination laced with desperation. Jenna, how long to rig the ship's speakers to broadcast at max power? If I push them, they'll probably blow, Jenna said, the hint of a grin tugging at her lips. But I could give it a shot. Great, Thane said. Let's roll the dice and see if we can't make these coalition types dance to our tune. Bold move, Cap, Gregor said, nodding in reluctant admiration. I'd say balls of steel, but that implies we're not all about to get vaporized. Optimism, Thane replied, clapping him on the shoulder. It's what keeps us alive. As Jenna set to work, the rest of the crew prepared for what felt like their last stand. Thane watched them, a ragtag band of misfits and outcasts held together by duct tape and sarcasm. Yet despite the odds, they were his crew, and he'd be damned if he let some coalition bullies take them down without a fight. Jenna, Thane's voice cut through the tense silence, how's it looking? Like a science fair project gone wrong, Jenna said, poking her head out from behind a panel. But it might just work. Might good enough for me, Thane replied, focusing on the console as the coalition fleet loomed ever closer. Gregor, open a channel. Aye, Cap, Gregor responded, fingers flying across the controls. Channel open. This is Captain Thane Lark of the Rusty Cutlass. Thane spoke, trying to keep his voice steady. We hear you're interested in our musical collection. I'd like to propose an exchange. Static crackled before a voice, smooth and authoritative, filled the cabin. Captain Lark, this is Admiral Callows of the Coalition. I regret to inform you that negotiations are not on the table. Surrender your vessel and all assets immediately. Well, Admiral, Thane said, injecting as much bravado as he could muster. How about a preview instead? With a nod to Jenna, Thane signaled her to activate the makeshift sound weapon. The ship trembled as the speakers blared Earth's music at frequencies that could probably peel paint. There was a pause, a moment of pregnant silence before the coalition's ships began to react. Tech started short-circuiting, lights flickered like Christmas in hell, and a chorus of alien curses reached their ears even over the din. Looks like it's working, Gregor shouted, eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and glee. For now, Thane cautioned, though he couldn't suppress the grin stretching across his face. Jenna, how long can we keep this up? Long enough, Jenna replied, her fingers dancing over the controls, to make their day really inconvenient. As the Coalition ship scrambled to recover, the rusty Cutlass punched its engines to full throttle, diving through an opening in the enemy ranks like a drunk staggering towards the nearest exit. "Nice work, team," Thane said, his heart pounding with the thrill of their narrow escape. "Let's not stick around for the encore." The ship powered away, leaving behind a fleet in disarray. But Thane knew it was only a matter of time before the Coalition regrouped. This victory was a fleeting one, and the reality of their situation soon settled back over him like an unwelcome guest. Captain Vix's voice broke the momentary silence. "We've bought ourselves time, but the Coalition will not give up so easily." "I know," Thane replied, weariness creeping into his voice. "We need a new plan, and fast." "We could always consider Marwick's offer," Gregor suggested. "Not that I trust the guy, but desperate times and all." "Desperate," Thane echoed, the word resonating like a bell tolling in his mind. "Let's keep that as a last resort." Jenna sighed, leaning back in her chair. "So, what now? We can't keep running forever." "I know," Thane said again, feeling the weight of command settling over him like a storm cloud. "We need to figure out how to use this music to our advantage before it gets us killed, or worse," Gregor added. "Bankrupt, either way," Thane continued. "We need resources, allies, anything that can give us an edge." "The Pale Ones, the rebels," Vix interjected, listing their enemies like a particularly unpleasant grocery list. "They will all seek your destruction." "Good to know we're so popular," Thane said, leaning against the console, his mind racing through potential allies and the slim possibilities of sanctuary. Captain Jenna's voice was softer, almost hesitant. "We're with you whatever you decide. Just try not to get us all killed." "All right, I'll do my best," Thane replied, meeting her gaze with a tired smile. No promises, though. The rusty Cutlass sailed on through the vast, indifferent void, each passing moment a testament to their resilience and foolhardy courage. With every breath, Thane felt the stakes rising, the pressure mounting as they walked the razor's edge between survival and oblivion. "All right, crew," Thane finally said, his voice firm despite the doubt gnawing at him. "Let's regroup, strategize, and figure out how to turn this nightmare into an opportunity." Gregor smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Never a dull moment with you, Cap." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Thane replied, though inwardly he wondered how much longer they could keep tempting fate. As the ship sped onward, seeking the elusive haven that might grant them a moment's peace, Thane couldn't shake the feeling that they were but one misstep away from disaster. Yet there was a strange comfort in it too, the knowledge that even in the face of overwhelming odds they would not go quietly. For now they had each other, a battered ship, and a dangerous secret that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. And for Thane Lark, that would have to be enough. The rusty Cutlass cruised on, a tired but determined heap of metal and dreams. Thane Lark, standing at the command console, couldn't help but wonder if they'd just orchestrated the galaxy's worst DJ set. The thought was amusing, in the way a gallows joke was, and he snorted to himself. If they couldn't laugh at the absurdity of their situation, they might as well open an airlock and get it over with. "Captain," Vix drawled from their spot on the floor, looking like a cat who'd eaten a particularly spicy canary. "You might want to see this." Thane turned, raising an eyebrow. "Does it involve another fleet trying to turn us into space dust, or are we being offered a record contract?" "Neither," Vix replied, lips curling into a grin that suggested mischief or madness, possibly both. "I found something in the archives that might make us rich or dead." "Well, when you put it like that, how can I possibly refuse?" Thane said, waving a hand for Vix to continue. Vix sauntered over to a dusty corner of the ship's mainframe, where technology from a bygone era hummed with the enthusiasm of a retiree at a poorly attended bingo night. With a flourish that suggested they were more ringmaster than crew member, Vix tapped a few buttons and brought up a holographic display. The display flickered uncertainly, but resolved into what appeared to be an ancient schematic. Thane leaned closer, squinting at the strange symbols and notations that danced across the screen like they had a mind of their own. "This," Vix said, gesturing at the display, "is an old section of the ship's archives, buried deeper than a politician's conscience." "And what exactly am I looking at?" Thane asked, his curiosity piqued despite himself. "Plans for an amplifier," Vix explained, eyes gleaming with that dangerous mix of hope and recklessness. "A way to boost the harmonizing properties of Earth's music." "Wait," Gregor interjected, wheeling his chair over with the grace of a drunken hippo. "You mean to tell us we've been sitting on a potential game changer?" "Wouldn't be the first time," Vix said, shrugging with infuriating nonchalance. "Ships like this one used to have all sorts of experimental tech for cultural enrichment." "Whatever that means." "So what?" Jenna chimed in, leaning against the wall with her usual air of skeptical detachment. "We just plug this thing in and hope it doesn't blow us all to kingdom come, more or less," Vix replied, clearly enjoying the spotlight. "Great," Thane said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Because what we really needed was another half-baked idea to pin our hopes on." "Hey, it worked last time," Gregor pointed out, his voice tinged with the kind of optimism that usually warranted a slap. "Last time," Thane repeated, "we got out by the skin of our teeth and left behind a very angry coalition fleet." "Not exactly a rousing success story, but it gives us a fighting chance," Vix insisted, their eyes bright with conviction or maybe insanity. It was hard to tell. "All right, let's entertain this idea," Thane said, clapping his hands together. "What do we need to make this thing work?" "We're going to need parts," Vix admitted, their earlier bravado tempered by practicality. "And not the kind you pick up at your local space mart." "Thalax Prime," Jenna suggested, the name rolling off her tongue like a curse. Thane grimaced, the very mention of the place dredging up memories as unpleasant as they were inevitable. "Of course, it would have to be Thalax Prime. The one-stop shop for all your dubious needs." "What, you don't like haggling with cutthroats and thieves?" Gregor asked, grinning as though he'd just told a particularly clever joke. "Not when I'm the merchandise," Thane replied, his expression souring like milk left out in the sun. "So it's settled," Vix said, clapping their hands in mock celebration. "Thalax Prime it is." "Let's go shopping." "Wonderful," Thane muttered, turning back to the command console. "Just what I always wanted. A suicide mission with a side of bankruptcy." As they set a course for Thalax Prime, the atmosphere on the bridge was as tense as a standoff in a spaghetti western. Thane could feel the eyes of his crew on him, each pair filled with varying degrees of trust and trepidation. They knew the stakes, understood the risks, but what choice did they have? "All right, everyone," Thane said, his voice firm but laced with the kind of humor that bordered on fatalism. "Let's prep for arrival, and try not to look too desperate. Wouldn't want anyone to think we were anything less than completely in control." "Of course," Jenna replied, her smile as dry as the Sahara. "Because nothing says control like a ragtag crew on a rundown ship heading into the galaxy's most infamous den of thieves." The journey to Thalax Prime was uneventful in the way that only a journey through the cold, indifferent void could be. Thane spent the time going over the plan, such as it was, and trying to ignore the nagging feeling in his gut that they were about to leap from the frying pan into the fire. "Captain," Jenna said, her voice cutting through his thoughts like a scalpel, "we're approaching Thalax Prime." "Great," Thane replied, shaking off the last vestiges of doubt. "Let's do this." As the rusty cutlass descended into the murky atmosphere of Thalax Prime, the sight that greeted them was as welcoming as a mugger in a dark alley. The planet's surface was a patchwork of industrial sprawl and shantytowns, each more decrepit than the last. "Charming," Gregor remarked, peering out at the view with the air of a man observing a particularly uninspired painting. "I'm sure it was lovely once," Thane said, adjusting their approach vector. "Before civilization got its grubby mitts on it." They touched down with all the grace of a drunk elephant, the ship's landing gear protesting loudly against the indignity. Thane powered down the engines and turned to his crew, each of whom wore expressions ranging from grim determination to something akin to resigned amusement. "All right, listen up," Thane said, adopting his best authoritative tone. "We get in, find what we need, and get out. No sightseeing, no side quests." "Understood, Crystal," Jenna replied, checking the charge on her weapon with the air of a woman who'd seen one too many bad situations. "Good," Thane said, feeling a strange mix of camaraderie and foreboding. "Let's move." The crew disembarked, stepping onto the surface of Thalax Prime with all the enthusiasm of prisoners headed to the gallows. The air was thick with the smell of industry and the kind of energy that suggested anything could happen and probably would. "Stick together, keep a low profile," Thane instructed, leading the way through the bustling streets. "And for the love of all that's good, don't make eye contact with anyone who looks like they might try to sell you something." They navigated the labyrinthine bazaar, a hive of scum and villainy that made even the most dubious spaceports look like family-friendly resorts. Merchants hawked their wares with the kind of enthusiasm that bordered on desperation, each trying to outshout the next in a cacophony of broken promises and questionable deals. "Over here," Vic said, gesturing towards a stall that looked marginally less disreputable than the rest. "This guy's got the parts we need." "Lovely," Thane said, eyeing the merchant with healthy skepticism. "Let's hope he doesn't ask for an arm and a leg." Literally. The merchant, a wiry man with a face as welcoming as a slap, greeted them with a smile that was more predatory than friendly. "Ah, travelers, welcome, welcome. I have everything your heart desires, and some things it most certainly doesn't. We're looking for components," Thane said, cutting to the chase. "Amplifiers, to be precise." The merchant's eyes lit up with the kind of interest that suggested they'd just asked for a golden goose. "Amplifiers, you say? I might have just the thing. Follow me." They trailed after the merchant, who led them to a back room stacked high with tech of dubious origin. Thane felt his hackles rise, instinct warning him that this was far from a safe environment. "Here we are," the merchant said, gesturing to a haphazard pile of equipment. "The best you'll find on Thalax Prime." "Not exactly a ringing endorsement," Gregor muttered under his breath, earning a snort of laughter from Jenna. Thane stepped forward, examining the parts with a critical eye. They were old, worn, but serviceable. "How much?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "For you, a special price," the merchant said, naming a figure that made Thane's eyes widen even as he fought to keep his expression neutral. "That's generous," Thane said, mentally calculating just how many limbs they'd have to sell to afford it. "Of course, if you're willing to trade," the merchant continued, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man scenting blood in the water, "I may be persuaded to lower the price." "We've got music," Vic said, stepping in with the kind of confidence that made Thane's stomach knot with anxiety. "Rare stuff, Earth music." The merchant's expression shifted, his interest sharpening to a razor's edge. "Earth music, you say? Now that's something you don't hear every day." "It's not just any music," Vix pressed, clearly in their element. "It's the kind that can change the course of galaxies." "Interesting," the merchant said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Show me." Vix produced a small holo set, activating it with a flourish. The air filled with the haunting notes of Earth's music, a symphony of sound that seemed to transcend time and space. The merchant listened, his eyes narrowing as he considered the offer. "Very well," he said finally. "I think we can come to an arrangement." Thane let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Excellent. Let's make this quick." The exchange was swift, the merchant handing over the components with the air of a man who'd just struck gold. As they turned to leave, Thane couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just set a chain of events in motion that would be as unstoppable as an avalanche. "Back to the ship," Thane said, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. "Let's get this thing up and running." "Lead the way, Captain," Jenna said, falling into step beside him. As they made their way back through the throng, Thane couldn't help but marvel at the audacity of their plan. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble that could either save them or doom them. But for now, it was their only hope. The crew of the Rusty Cutlass returned to their ship, laden with parts and possibilities. As they prepared to install the amplifier, Thane felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time: hope. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed under the weight of reality, but for the moment it was enough to keep them going. "All right," Thane said, addressing his crew as they set to work. "Let's see if we can turn this pile of metal and dreams into something that can change our fate." Jenna grinned, her eyes alight with determination. "Here's to doing the impossible, Captain." As they worked, the ship hummed with activity, each crew member focused on their task. The stakes were high, the odds daunting, but together they had a shot. A slim one, but a shot nonetheless. For Thane Lark and his crew, that would have to be enough. As the Rusty Cutlass hummed with the sound of crew members installing the new amplifiers, Captain Thane Lark found himself wondering if they hadn't just traded one form of doom for another. Earth's music, dangerous, subversive, and now wired into their ship's systems. It was like strapping a nuclear warhead to a paper glider, but what choice did they have? "Remind me again why we're doing this," Gregor muttered, struggling with a particularly uncooperative wire. "Because we're idiots who think we're geniuses," Thane replied, giving his own wire a tug. "And because if we don't, we're all going to end up as space debris." "Right," Gregor said, nodding as if that made perfect sense. "Proceed with the genius idiocy." Vix, crouched in a corner with their ever-present grin, was busy fine-tuning the settings on the command console. "Remember, Captain, when the Coalition fleet shows up, just hit play. Let the music do its thing." Thane nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. They were betting everything on a theory. No less than a theory, a hunch, that Earth's music could be used to unite rather than divide. It was either that or run, and they'd already used up their quota of cowardice for the year. "How's it looking over there, Jenna?" Thane called out, watching as she tinkered with the thermal couplings like a surgeon with a grudge against machinery. "About as stable as a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest," Jenna replied, her tone dry enough to make a desert blush. "But it'll do. That's the spirit," Thane said, trying and failing to sound optimistic. The truth was, he didn't have a clue if this plan of theirs would work. Earth's music had toppled empires and sparked revolutions, but that was a long time ago. Now it was just a memory, a relic of a past that most people would rather forget. Still, it was all they had. As they continued their work, the atmosphere in the ship was tense, each crew member focused on their task, each one aware of the ticking clock. The Coalition fleet was closing in, their mission clear: to neutralize the threat of Earth's music before it could spread and disrupt the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. "Incoming transmission," Jenna announced, glancing up from her work. "Is it too much to hope they're calling to surrender?" Thane asked, already knowing the answer. "They want us to power down and prepare to be boarded," Jenna said, her expression as dry as a martini in a sandstorm. "Of course they do," Thane sighed. "Tell them we're busy right now, maybe later." Jenna smirked, tapping a few keys. Message sent. "I'm sure they'll be understanding." Thane turned his attention to the holographic display, its ancient schematic now a tangle of wires and circuits. "All right, team, this is it. We play the music and we hope it does something more useful than just getting us killed." "Good pep talk," Gregor said, rolling his eyes. "Really inspires confidence." "Hey, I'm a captain, not a motivational speaker," Thane shot back. "Everyone ready?" A chorus of affirmative sounds filled the air, each crew member giving a final nod as they braced for what was to come. Thane took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the command console. "Here goes nothing," he said, pressing the button with all the confidence of a man betting his life on a coin toss. The music that filled the ship was unlike anything they'd ever heard, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate through the very bones of the Rusty Cutlass. It was a symphony of history and rebellion, hope and despair, a call to arms and a plea for peace all rolled into one. Outside, the Coalition ships hung in the void like specters, their weapons primed and ready. But as the music reached them, something changed. The harsh lines of their formation wavered, the cold precision of their maneuvers faltering as if the music had reached into their souls and shaken them to their cores. Thane watched the display, his heart pounding in his chest. Are they retreating?" he asked, not daring to believe it. Jenna checked the readings, her eyes widening in disbelief. "I think they are," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Vix let out a breathless laugh, their grin wider than ever. "I told you it would work, Captain. Earth's music, it's a weapon, but it's also a bomb. A reminder of what we once were, what we could be again." Thane could hardly believe it. The Coalition fleet, the most feared force in the galaxy, was backing down, their ships peeling away one by one as the music enveloped them. It was as if the melody had reached into their hearts and minds, uncovering something long buried and all but forgotten. "Well, I'll be damned," Gregor said, shaking his head in wonder. "We actually did it." Thane felt a laugh bubbling up inside him, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "I can't believe it worked," he said, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Never underestimate the power of a good tune," Jenna said, a rare smile softening her features. As the last of the Coalition ships disappeared into the void, Thane slumped back in his chair, the weight of his relief almost overwhelming. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd used Earth's music to turn the tide, to show that even in a galaxy as bleak and divided as theirs, unity was possible. "Now what?" Gregor asked, looking around at the others. "Now," Thane said, his voice filled with a newfound determination, "we keep this music safe. We find a way to share it, to show others what it can do, not as a weapon but as a beacon of hope." Vix nodded, their expression serious for once. "A new beginning, Captain. A chance to change things." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Thane said, though he couldn't suppress the flicker of hope rising within him. "But yeah, maybe this is the start of something." The crew of the Rusty Cutlass sat in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. They'd come through the fire, their gamble had paid off, and now the future stretched out before them, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. "All right," Thane said, breaking the silence. "Let's get moving. We've got a galaxy to save, or at least slightly improve." As the ship powered up, its engines humming to life, Thane felt a sense of purpose he'd thought long dead. They'd won a small victory, but it was enough to light the way forward. With Earth's music as their guide, they set a course for the stars, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Rusty Cutlass soared into the void, leaving the chaos of Thalax Prime behind. For Thane and his crew, the journey was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were heading in the right direction. And as the music played, echoing through the corridors of the ship, it carried with it the promise of a better tomorrow, a promise that, for the first time, felt within their grasp. As they settled into the familiar rhythm of space travel, Jenna looked over at Thane, a smirk playing on her lips. "So, Captain, what's the plan for when we run into the next batch of trouble?" Thane shrugged, his grin as irrepressible as ever. "Same as always, make it up as we go along. But this time, we've got the universe's best soundtrack to back us up." Gregor chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "I'll drink to that." "Please do," Vix added, their grin as mischievous as ever. "Lord knows we could use a bit of liquid courage." The laughter that filled the ship was a balm to wounds long endured, a reminder that even in a universe as grim as theirs, there was still room for joy, for friendship, and for hope. As the Rusty Cutlass continued its journey, the crew knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time, they also knew they weren't alone. Earth's music had shown them a path forward, a way to unite and inspire, and for that they were grateful. In a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos, they had found a light in the darkness, a light that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. The music played on, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and as long as it did, Thane Lark and his crew would continue to fight, to hope, and to dream of a brighter future. For the Rusty Cutlass and its ragtag crew, the journey was far from over, but it was a journey they were ready to face together. After all, what was a little chaos and uncertainty compared to the power of an unforgettable melody? And as the ship sailed into the stars, the music echoed through the vastness of space, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was still hope, still beauty, and still a chance for something better. Thane stood by the command console, the ship humming with the afterglow of their recent victory. His eyes traced the lines of space outside the rusty cutlass, his thoughts a swirling mix of relief and disbelief. They'd done it. They'd turned Earth's music, that ancient relic of rebellion, into their savior. And the Coalition fleet, well, they'd been scared off like cats caught in a rainstorm. Jenna wandered over, wiping grease from her hands with a rag that looked like it had seen better days. A lot of them. "So, Captain," she drawled, "what's it feel like to be the galaxy's newest savior?" Thane snorted. "Savior's a bit strong, don't you think? More like accidental hero or lottery winner. And I didn't even have to buy a ticket." Jenna chuckled, the sound dry as the air in their rusty tub of a ship. "Hey, whatever gets us out alive and with a profit is a win in my book." Gregor appeared, fiddling with a stubborn piece of wiring. "I still can't believe that music worked," he said, shaking his head. "I mean, who knew that old Earth noise could work as a weapon? Less of a weapon, more of a universal chill-out signal." Vix chimed in from behind the console. The galaxy was due for a group hug. "Lucky us, we got to play DJ. Maybe next time we'll make them a mixtape," Thane suggested, grinning. "Something with more beat, less existential dread." Jenna tapped a couple of buttons on the console, eyes glued to a holographic display that spat out data like a particularly verbose fortune teller. "Looks like the Coalition's headed back to their corner of the galaxy, probably to lick their wounds and plot our demise." "Good," Thane said. "Gives us some breathing space. And time to figure out what to do with this musical nuke we've got. Share it." Vix suggested, their tone only half mocking. "If it can make those Coalition hardasses reconsider their life choices, imagine what it could do for other folks. Might even start a trend. Music therapy for the galaxy." Thane mulled that over. "Or we could accidentally start a craze and end up on the wrong side of some music licensing laws." "Intergalactic lawyers, not my idea of fun," Jenna shrugged. "We've faced worse." "Like current company," Gregor added, earning a mock glare from Vix. "Still," Thane said, his voice more serious now, "we can't just sit on this. Earth's music could. I don't know, maybe it could actually change things. For the better." "Spoken like a man who forgot we're labeled as criminals," Jenna pointed out. "But hey, I'm all for a bit of misguided optimism." "Misguided or not, it got us this far," Thane replied. "And besides, what's the point in being a criminal if you can't also be a visionary?" They shared a laugh, a rare, genuine one that echoed through the ship like a reminder that not all was lost. They'd survived, and for the first time in a long time, they had a glimmer of something resembling hope. "Right," Thane said, clapping his hands together as if to physically shake off the weight of the past few hours. "Let's set a course for somewhere less hostile. Maybe Thalax Prime. They've got the best black market for, well, everything." "Good idea," Gregor said, with a grin that spoke volumes about his own plans for a less-than-legal shopping spree. Vix tapped a few keys, the ship humming to life around them. Coordinates set. "And about that music, maybe we can spread it around a bit quietly. See which way the wind blows." Thane nodded. "Quietly sounds good. Last thing we need is another fleet on our tail." Jenna stood, stretching out the kinks from too many oars bent over machinery. "I'd say it's time for a drink. After the day we've had, we're overdue." "Make mine a double," Thane said, already envisioning the burn of some cheap Thalaxian brew sliding down his throat. "Only if you promise not to do karaoke," Gregor shot back, making his way to the small galley that served as their makeshift lounge. "And miss the chance to serenade you all with my rendition of Space Oddity." Never, the crew of the Rusty Cutlass settled into the rhythm of space travel, familiar, comforting in its own way. The ship hummed softly, a contented beast after a hard-won escape. They each found their places, little corners of the ship that offered some peace amidst the chaos of the universe. Jenna, ever practical, lined up shot glasses with all the precision of a soldier preparing for battle. "Here's to not dying," she said, raising hers high. "And to making a whole lot of people very uncomfortable," Vix added. Gregor clinked his glass against theirs. "And to the unexpected half-decent plans that somehow work out." They drank, the sharp liquor a balm for frayed nerves and weary minds. Thane leaned back in his chair, feeling the tension of the past days finally begin to ebb away. They'd done it against all odds. And more importantly, they'd done it together. As the ship drifted through the vast expanse of space, a silence settled over them, a comfortable one like old friends sitting together on a porch, watching the world go by. "So, Vix," Thane said, breaking the quiet, "what do you think? Did we change the galaxy today?" Vix pondered for a moment, their fingers tracing idle patterns on the table. "Maybe, maybe not. But we nudged it a bit, pushed it in a direction it hasn't been in a while, that's something." "Just don't expect a medal," Jenna quipped. "Or a parade. I hate parades," Thane laughed. "No medals, no parades. Just a crew and a ship and a crazy idea that somehow worked." "Which means we're due for a colossal screw-up soon," Gregor said, ever the pessimist. "Let's not tempt fate," Thane replied, though he couldn't suppress the grin that spread across his face. They fell into a companionable silence once more, each lost in their own thoughts as the ship carried them onward, away from the chaos they'd left behind and into whatever awaited them ahead. The coalition might come knocking again, or someone else entirely. But for now they had Earth's music safely in their grasp and a galaxy full of endless possibilities stretching out before them. "And what about after Thalax Prime?" Jenna asked, curious. "What's the next adventure?" "Who knows?" Thane replied, throwing his arms wide. "The universe is a big place full of surprises. Maybe we'll find another crazy scheme to try. Or maybe we'll finally get that quiet corner of the galaxy we've been dreaming about." "Dreaming?" Vix echoed, feigning shock. "I thought we were criminals, not poets." "Dreaming, scheming, same difference," Thane said. "But whatever we do, we'll do it together. And that's enough for me." The rusty cutlass sailed on through the stars, the music of old Earth echoing softly in its corridors. And as the crew raised another toast to the unknown future, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they always had, cynically, sarcastically, and with just a hint of reckless bravado. For now, that was enough. And in a grim, chaotic universe, it was all they could really ask for.